You've served at this institution. How difficult is that going to be? Is that the one thing Ukraine cannot walk away with this week?
Well, I think they're going to get all of the parameters that are going to be required, and they're going to get all the help to fulfill those parameters. And I think what they will get is an assurance that when they meet those tests that every new ally has to meet, that they will be included. And I just know in my heart they're going to be a member of NATO when this horrendous war that they had nothing to do with started. Now I think they have shown such courage and such spirit that they deserve to be with us in a relationship that is a secure relationship.
Well, we're really glad that you're here, because in the time that you were ambassador, you probably couldn't have imagined the moment we're in right now for the 75th anniversary of NATO, with great uncertainty following elections in Europe, uncertainty here domestically, with big questions about the commander-in-chief and his ability to actually do the job, never mind run for it again. How difficult will it be for this summit to produce results with all of that said?
The summit will produce results. There's no doubt that it's not the happiest time, but we're in a war, and so it wouldn't be a happy time anyway.
Sure.
But there is a lot of political turmoil in Europe, in America. There's no doubt about that. What just gives me hope is that we have surpassed so many challenges in our 75-year history. We were just finished with World War II. How could anything be even more horrible than World War II? But putting NATO together was to prevent another world war. And that's what we have been working to do by adapting, which we have. Now we have expanded. I think Europe is now much more clear-eyed about Russia, and that was needed. And now they're getting there. And we're going to be with them, and we're going to form a coalition of like-minded, both Europe and Canada and the U.S., but also into the Asia-Pacific. We have a common threat now with Asia-Pacific countries. So I think our security alliance, led by NATO, is going to be a deterrence for future world conflict.
But there very much is a question about the future. As we talk about political uncertainty, none of us really know what's going to happen in November or therefore in January of next year. That's actually something that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky talked about at the Ronald Reagan Institute last night. He talked about how even Vladimir Putin is awaiting the results of November, but pleaded with NATO allies, instead of waiting until then, to act now.
It's time to step out of the shadows, to make strong decisions work, to act and not to wait for November or any other months to this end.
Obviously talking about the month of November for a very specific reason.
Right, yes,
Ambassador, there has been a lot of conversation here in Washington about Trump-proofing NATO should he win a second term. Can you look allies in the eye and suggest that they don't have any right to be concerned about what might happen if he is president once again, given the rhetoric we have heard directly from him?
Well, I think the allies are going to be meeting with members of Congress, for instance, and no president can leave NATO or withdraw from NATO without a vote of Congress. And Congress is very supportive of NATO, of the alliance, and of Ukraine. I think that President Zelensky, of course, is just an amazingly resilient leader in toughest of circumstances. And of course he wants action now, and we're giving him the arms, and I think finally we are also giving him more freedom to use these arms to take out the bases that are putting those missiles into children's hospitals, which just happened in the last 2 days. And I think we are going to give him these more assets, but also more freedom to use them to take out the places that are bombing and maiming his own people and just ruining the infrastructure.
This idea, though, of possibly redefining Article 5, basing protection on levels of contribution, what do you make of this? Our listeners and viewers are trying to figure out what's real right now. Is that just bluster from Donald Trump?
I think that Article 5 is our ironclad commitment that if one of us is attacked, everyone will help. Of course, it's only been invoked once, and it was for America. And I don't think the size of the contribution has anything to do with it. What we want to do is speak not with one voice of America. We want 32 voices and our 40 partners saying the same thing about the rules-based order in the whole globe. And that's what NATO is bringing together, a security alliance that has 32 members, 40 partners that want our way of life, that want freedom. And if we stand together, we're not going to say, well, you're a small country and we're a big country and therefore we're not going to help you as much. Yeah. No, that's not our commitment. That's not unity.
So whether he wants to or not, your point is that's not the agreement we've made in this alliance.
That is right. That's right. And President Zelensky was awesome last night. I was there. And he is being so patient, grateful, very appreciative. But the leaders of Congress were there too, and they are all pro-Ukraine. They understand. It's Republicans and Democrats, quite bipartisan. And I think that he knows in his heart, of course, that he wants more, but he knows that everything that we're giving him is more than any other new country that seeks membership as an ally has gotten. And that is all of that help to get him to the place where he can really say, yes, we will be a part of NATO.
Well, so that would likely need to happen after the conflict comes to an end. Yesterday, sitting in that chair that you're in now, we spoke with the foreign minister of Latvia, who basically told us Ukraine needs to decide how it wants to define victory. What victory do you think is really likely for Ukraine, assuming that it can maintain the level of support it currently has?
That's a really good question, Kailey, because it's hard to know with all of the Crimea and the Donbass that Russia has taken. Of course, Ukraine wants everything back, and they are fighting for that. They can't. They're not going to go to a negotiating table with the lines that Russia has drawn. We've got to start with the lines that are the sovereign nation of the Ukraine. And they deserve their whole country back. And they have fought for it. And we should be helping them to say to Putin, we are united. We're not going to lose interest in what you have done. And he should pay a price for bombing a children's hospital. And then with the ridiculous statement of saying, oh, that was a mistake that the Ukrainian people made. Are you kidding me? So it just doesn't pass the test of really being sincere about what the goal is.